according to me, there's these three huge problems that we have to solve. And one of them is population growth. One of them is reducing the unsustainable lifestyle of millions of us. Most of us have more than we need. Some people have way, way, way more than they need. And we must alleviate poverty, because if you're really poor, you're going to cut down the last trees, fish the last fish, because you've got to feed your family.
Hello, everybody. It's Ed Gemmell, Managing Director of Scientists Warning Europe. I'm delighted to be welcoming as our guest here today, Dr. Jane Goodall, DBE, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace. And Dr. Jane Goodall has very kindly agreed to answer a number of questions and to talk to us about questions coming out of our group and out of the Scientists Warnings to Humanity. Thank you, Jane. Jane, the first question, what do you feel are the biggest issues in relation to climate change? And what, in your opinion, do we need to do to prevent further climate change?
Well, it's a very difficult question, because climate change is the result of so many different things. But it's very clear we need to get governments behind this issue. And we need to get, I think, more education for people, because everybody can make a difference. And, what are the most important things? Well, obviously controlling our fossil fuel emissions is one, but also, and very important, especially in the short term, while more scientific innovations are created that will help us live in better harmony with nature, and we develop, more alternative energy sources, make them cheaper and more widespread. But protecting, saving, restoring our forests and planting trees and cleaning the ocean, these are very, very important, because forests and oceans, of course, as everyone, well, not everyone knows, but they're the great lungs of the planet. They absorb carbon dioxide. They even filter air in cities when they're planted, trees do. And the oceans also absorb carbon dioxide, and both forests and oceans, when they're healthy, give us the oxygen that we need to breathe. So these things are very important, along with the real educational push and helping people understand that what we do as individuals does make a difference.
Yes, thank you. I mean, the world scientists have clearly been warning about this, and in the world scientists' warning of a climate emergency from last year, they listed 6 stressor areas, all requiring a great deal of attention. Energy, short-lived pollutants, nature, food, sustainable economy, and population. Do you feel any of these should be given greater priority?
Well, everything is so interrelated. I learned this in the rainforest, and we need to give priority to all of those issues. It's really important, protecting nature and population, all the rest of it. And they all are interwoven in a situation that we've created, which has led to climate change, which is probably the greatest threat that humanity faces today. And interestingly, as a spin-off from this, it's our absolute disrespect of nature and animals that's led to this pandemic. And so we see again and again how these different aspects of one problem, we need to tackle them all together, and they all have a role to play.
Yes. In which case then, which concerns you more? Destruction of nature, species extinction and loss of biodiversity, or global warming and climate change?
Well, as the first 3 that you mentioned lead to climate change, which is due to global warming, they're all equally important, which, well, I'm working particularly on the nature part of it. And, but, as I say, the first 3 that you listed, which were
nature, species extinction, and
loss of biodiversity. That's what has led to global warming, along with our fossil fuel emissions and our emissions of methane gas as well. So we need to tackle them all. It's again and again, I come back to the same old story. Unfortunately, it's the one advantage, perhaps, of population growth, that there's enough people who care passionately about enough of these different aspects, that there's plenty of people working on those separate aspects. What's needed desperately is a way of bringing this all together so that the actions of one group seamlessly fit into the actions of another,
Yes.
moving towards the right kind of outcome.
Yes, absolutely right. You mentioned, emissions there. Over 100 governments of the world have joined a Climate Action Alliance, and they've agreed to work towards a net zero 2050 target. Do you think this is going far enough to keep people in the world safe when many scientists are saying we should really be heading for a 2030 net zero target?
Well, I'm not a climate scientist, and I'm not about to give some kind of, wonderful answer to that question. All I know is that we do have a window of time to start making change. I don't think it's a big window. It's closing all the time. In so many ways, emissions are getting worse, and at the moment populations are growing, even though the long-term prediction is a drop in fertility. But right now, we just need to get together and take action now as soon as possible. And rather than guess how many years we have, which means trying to work out how well we succeed in what we're trying to do, we haven't got time to do all that. We just need to do what we know we need to do.
Yes. Well, that again might be different leading on to the next question. You yourself were a pioneer as a woman in science in the 1960s. Today, in relation to the discussion about the climate crisis, both in relation to scientists and policymakers, the majority of them are still men. Do you think we might have taken a different course and earlier action to prevent the climate crisis if more of these voices had been coming from women?
Well, we might, but there are some pretty strong voices for climate. The person who springs to mind, of course, straight away is Vandana Shiva. And there's 2 or 3 other people whose names stand out. But what we do find in the developing world is that it's women who really, it's women in rural areas, in the villages. And once they get educated and once their voices are heard, they really are making a difference locally. So I think women, maybe through evolution, women have a more nurturing side to their nature. And women traditionally, looking after the family, feeding the family, women notice very quickly changes in the environment, the changing weather patterns and so on. So I think it's a very good sign that more and more women are getting involved. And in our youth program, there's literally thousands of young, passionate women who care about the climate. Greta Thunberg is just one example out of many, many strong youth voices, female voices, yes.
And you particularly mentioned the youth, of which Greta Thunberg is a fantastic representative of it. You've started your own organisation, Roots and Shoots, encouraging groups of children and students to take action on the basis that every individual action really does make a difference. Well, looking at what faces us, do you feel action on the climate crisis should be led by individuals taking their own action or by government doing heavy lifting?
Once again, we need both. We need the governments to kind of give the support behind individual action, and we need the individual action to carry out what the government is advocating, or to push, which often happens, to push governments and business too, and corporations to do better, because it's the corporate involvement that so often is extraordinarily damaging to the environment. But our Roots and Shoots program began because as I was traveling around the world, which I did 300 days a year before pandemic lockdown, I was meeting so many young people, high school, university, who seemed to have lost hope because they said, "You compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it." We indeed have compromised their future. We've been stealing their future for ages and ages and ages, and we're still stealing it today. But when they said there was nothing that they could do, that's where I thought, no, that's not right. We do have this window of time. And so what began with 12 high school students in Tanzania, as you say, main message, each one of us makes an impact every day. And with the goal of every group choosing themselves, they choose 3 types of project, one to help people, one to help animals, and one to help the environment. Because I learned in the rainforest how interrelated all of this is. So what began with those 12 students is now in 86 countries. It's growing. We've got members in preschool, kindergarten, university, and young people who've left university too, in 86 countries, and it's growing. And it's my greatest reason for hope because, everywhere there are these young people and they are taking action. Roots and Shoots is not about just marching in the streets. It's sitting down in your group. And of course, the younger ones have a teacher or a parent. And what are you passionate about? What do you really care about in this world that we've messed up so badly for you? And there's always in every group, there's some who want to help animals, some who want to help the environment, some who want to help people. And so around the world, when I look at the difference these young people are making, they're planting literally millions of trees. And it's all over. We've got about, over 1,000 groups in China. We're in different African countries. We're all over North America. We're growing fast in Latin America. We've got a lot of groups in other parts of Asia, starting to in India, and of course in Europe. So it's my greatest hope for the future is these young people.
It sounds absolutely fantastic. And being Scientists Warning Europe, it'd be very interesting to hear maybe what's the most inspiring action these young people have been taking, or most interesting action they've been taking, maybe particularly in Europe.
Well, again, it's tree planting and protection of forests and learning about and working. Sometimes it's writing letters to governments about protecting various environments that they're passionate about, or various animals. And, you get groups who are fighting for the wolves that are being reintroduced into Europe, or the bears. Now we've got the bison coming in. And so they're also tackling industry. They're tackling the palm oil industry and writing to companies, telling them they must label as palm oil, or they must label genetically modified foods and things like that. So, because they're so different, each one of us is different. And we all have different concerns that we really are passionate about. They're just making huge change everywhere.
Fantastic. Yes, I think that partly answers even the next question in a funny sort of way. But if you were going to be talking to individuals generally, and now not just the youth that are in the groups that you're talking about, can you name one or maybe more than one particular thing an individual could be doing to make the greatest impact?
Well, certainly one huge impact, which I always tell everybody, is stop eating a lot of meat, preferably eat no meat, preferably try and move to a plant-based diet. People seem not to understand. It's not, I stopped eating meat because of ethical reasons. The factory farms are so cruel. Mm-hmm. But we realize that these billions and billions of tortured, stressed animals around the world all have to be fed. That means destroying environments to grow grain to feed them. More grain grown to feed livestock than starving people. It's shocking, but that's the case. It's using up a lot of water, which in some places is so precious. Clean surface water takes a lot to change vegetable to animal protein. They're all producing methane gas during their digestion. It's one of the biggest contributors to the greenhouse gas as far as methane is concerned. And then added to that, some people seem not to care about the environment. They don't particularly care about animals. They do care about their own health. So it's our disrespect of these farmed animals, as well as our disrespect of wild animals that we traffic to sell in wildlife markets in Asia, bushmeat markets in Africa. But it's also these factory farms that led to this pandemic of zoonotic disease, where a pathogen, in this case a virus, jumped from an animal, almost certainly in the wildlife market of Wuhan, China, and led to this terrible pandemic. But many zoonotic diseases have started in factory farms, not necessarily pandemics, but it's estimated that 75% of all newly emerging human diseases are zoonotic in nature. So we just have, again, it's all so interrelated, all of these different problems, so that we do need different groups tackling different things, but doing it together. So like I explained in our Roots and Shoots groups, we have young people in one group working on animals, people, environment. They don't all have to do the same thing, but they do all have to discuss with each other what they're doing to understand this interrelationship.
Great, thank you. You've been active for a very long time in the area, and you've done an enormous amount of work in more recent years on climate and environmental awareness. And as you say, traveling 300 days of the year. Many climate activists find it very hard work and very draining in many ways, both physically and psychologically. Maybe you could share some of your experiences of it, and maybe you could tell us some positive stories or unexpected outcomes from your work that inspired you to keep going and keep putting the energy in.
Well, first of all, to answer the sort of last bit first, I keep going because, as I've already said, the young people are tremendously inspiring. And also, I care desperately about young people. I care desperately about the environment. I care desperately about animals. And seeing what's going wrong seems not to be getting that much better. I'm an obstinate kind of person, and I feel pushed, impelled to keep on. I'm not going to let these big corporations or these horrible government leaders to get the better of us. And I know, because I've been told, that after I've given a lecture, or even a Zoom lecture, which is amazing, but still, that people get inspired and they write to me and they say, "You've inspired me to do my bit. I had given up." So if we give up, we don't take action. So keeping people understanding that they do collectively make a huge difference when they make ethical choices. What do I buy? What do I eat? What do I wear? How was it made? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap because of child slave labor or sweatshops or inequitable wages? And so ethical choices. And I'm seeing more and more people getting the message, making these ethical choices. And the young people are educating their parents and their grandparents, some of whom are in, responsible positions and actually can make decisions that impact huge areas of the population. And so it's accumulation of all these different things. And then one program of the Jane Goodall Institute is very dear to my heart and has succeeded in many ways. And that's, when I began work in Gombe National Park, where I started studying chimps in 1960, it was part of what we called the equatorial forest belt that stretched from East Africa right to the West African coast. By 1990 and probably 1980, when I flew over this tiny national park, it was a small island forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, farmland overused and infertile, desperate people desperate to grow food to feed their families, even cutting trees on the steep slopes, terrible erosion, streams getting silted up. And that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, we can't save chimps, forests, or anything else. And so we began a program in 1994 called Take Care, or Tokari, as we call it. And again, it's holistic. And I won't go into the details of it now, but it's very holistic, involving restoring fertility to overused farmland without chemicals, and better education and health facilities. This is what they wanted. We got a very small grant from the European Union, and it was fascinating. The biggest problem getting that grant was because they were telling us, you haven't asked for enough money. We don't give these small grants. So finally, we managed to persuade them to give us the money spread over 3 years, so that it was what we wanted per year, because nobody was doing it back then, not the way we wanted to. We didn't know it would work. And anyway, it's been so successful that it started with the 12 villages around Gombe, with us sending local people in to listen to the villagers, to ask them what they wanted. And gradually they came to trust us, and we could introduce water management programs, then scholarships to keep girls in school, because it's been shown all around the world that women who are better educated tend to have smaller families. And we provided family planning, and people want that because they can no longer afford to educate 10 children. And they're now all getting much more educated, and they've all mostly got access to radios. They hear the news. They want to educate their children. They want to give them a good chance in life. And they know they can't educate lots of them. So it's beginning to work. And as a result, and we've now introduced up-to-date, cutting edge, really, technology, satellite imagery, GIS, GPS. It's in 104 villages throughout Chimp Range in Tanzania. You fly over the area now, you won't see bare hills. The trees come back. Roots and Shoots is in all the schools, and that program is in 6 other countries. So if we realize the importance of protecting forests in climate change, and we realize that in all these different countries, forests are being protected by this program, and biodiversity too, because we're part of the natural world. We depend on it for our survival. And some people seem to think that we're completely separate, but we're not. And we depend on healthy ecosystems. And a healthy ecosystem is made up of the biodiversity, the different animal and plant species that are intertwined and have a relationship with each other that keeps that environment healthy. And as we lose plant or an animal species, it's like we tear a hole in that magical tapestry of life. And in some places, it's getting so tattered that it's very close to ecosystem collapse. That will turn around and hurt us.
Yes. So a lot of inspiring materials with a warning at the end there. Thank you. And you're mentioning earlier on of inspiring people to do their bit. It would be, let's hope that they keep doing a little bit more every day, and then we'll eventually get there where we need to go to. You also mentioned in relation to women's education and other things in the program you just talked about. I know you're also a patron of Population Matters, so you're clearly concerned about population growth. Do you view this as more important than global warming and climate change, or do you have a view on what would be a sustainable human population level? How do you think that might be achieved?
Well, I can't answer the last bit. I'm not going into numbers, but I know that population growth plays a very major role in climate change, a very major role. And, we've got an estimated 7.8 billion of us on the planet now. And already in some places we're using up natural resources faster than nature can replenish them. And it's estimated at closer to 10 billion by 2050. So how will the planet cope? And one gets attacked for talking about population issues. It's politically incorrect, but those are the facts. There's nothing political about it. 7.8 billion of us now, harming the environment, 10 billion of us in 2050. Those are just facts. Like global warming, facts. People can be climate change deniers, but they're not looking at the facts. And I think a lot of it's about education, ignorance. I mean, sometimes people, I think they perfectly understand climate change, but they want to carry on with business as usual. So they don't even want to think about it because they want to go on with their own, building up their companies, getting them bigger and bigger and getting more power, more wealth. So, yeah, climate change is population growth is tremendously important. And I mentioned that in our Takari program, educating women, girls. We also empower women with microcredit programs started by Mohammed Yunus with the Grameen Bank. And so as women get empowered, we listen to their voices, and the girls are growing up and having smaller families by and large. So that's, but what the size should be, I don't know. But I do know if we go on growing at this rate, it's unsustainable now, really. And yes, in the long run, the curves of fertility go down, but that's rather looking far ahead. And I don't know how much time we have.
Yes, you sound very much like singing off the same hymn sheet as the scientist warnings themselves, which certainly don't shy away from population, although link it straight to the other stressors, which they're all linked at the hip, as we know. And in fact, in relation to scientist warnings, just as an extra question, you'd mentioned a lot in the different answers that we've been talking about saving and protecting with the environment and with the climate and with the biosphere. And with the three items that we're often given, restoration, mitigation, and adaptation, the scientists' warnings effectively focus on restoration and mitigation and not so much on adaptation. It sounds to me like your own view also focuses on mitigation and restoration.
Yes, but at the same time, we have to think about the other aspect because of all the people who have been thrust into untenable situations. We've already got this migration crisis. People are leaving because the land where they grew up, where their people have lived for generations, is now becoming drought-ridden or flooded or whatever it is. So we've got to help them. We've got to help them adapt, while at the same time we're struggling to mitigate and again, it's all tied in together. According to me, there's these three huge problems that we have to solve. And one of them is population growth. One of them is reducing the unsustainable lifestyle of millions of us. Most of us have more than we need. Some people have way, way, way more than they need. And we must alleviate poverty because if you're really poor, you're going to cut down the last trees, fish the last fish, because you've got to feed your family. You're going to live in an urban area, you're going to buy the cheapest junk food because you simply can't afford to make an ethical choice. So those three things, along with corruption, I would say are really key issues to tackle.
Yes. Thank you very much on that. Now to come back maybe to a question which you are uniquely placed to answer as opposed to anybody else in the world, and was one that was asked by one of our members. Please, could you share your thoughts on the chimpanzee's incipient religious awakening at the waterfall in Gemmell?
Well, I'm not going to call it incipient religious awakening, but the thing is, when the chimpanzees, usually the males, when they approach there's one particular waterfall, it drops 80 feet, and it's a very shallow stream, but it's rocky. So as the water falls, it's worn itself a groove in the rock face. And so it plunges down this narrow channel that it's worn in the rock over the ages. and it lands with a thunderous roar and water springs up. And always when you go there, there's a breeze because of the displacement of air by the water. And not always, but sometimes the chimpanzees will approach, and as they get closer, their hair stands on end, and they start sometimes giving an ooh, 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 and then they'll, normally avoiding the water, they'll actually go into this shallow stream and upright, swaying from foot to foot, picking up and hurling big rocks, sometimes climbing the vines at the side of the waterfall and pushing out into the spray. And then if you're lucky enough to, when they've finished, this can last 10 minutes, and you can see them sitting, looking up at where the water's coming from and following it. You know, what is this stuff? It's always coming, it's always here, it's always going. And my feeling always is that they must have a feeling of awe, similar to what I feel when I see one of these wondrous sights of nature, a sort of spiritual connection to the natural world. But we at some point in our evolution developed this way of speaking with words, communicating with words. And I feel that for the chimpanzees, it's kind of, each one has this feeling in a way locked inside. Yes, they can do a joint display, but they can't talk about what does it mean. But if they could, couldn't that lead to one of the early animistic religions, you know, worship of the water, the sun, the moon, the stars, things that people didn't understand? So that's, it could lead to a kind of early religion.
Very, very interesting, and certainly something not many people but could be commenting on. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's such a help to us at Scientists Warning Europe. And I'm sure that all the scientists that signed all those warnings will be absolutely delighted as well through their show of support. I know that we talked earlier on about the warnings, and I think you said you would be looking forward to signing the warnings in the near future as well.
Yes.
That would be wonderful, joining the other scientists.
I will definitely sign them because they're real. We've got to wake up to the fact that we're part of it. We've got to do something about it.
Fantastic, thank you. And in fact, I think the second warning, one of the statements of the scientists is that the scientists have got to tell it as it is, and you certainly do that for us, so thank you. So thank you so much then. That's Dr. Jane Goodall, the founder of the Jane Goodall Institute. Thank you very much for joining Scientists Warning Europe.
Well, thank you, and good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We all need good luck.
Thank you so much, Jane, for that. I know you're so busy. It's wonderful for you to give up some of your precious time to help us with this. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing on environmental activism today and throughout all the years. Scientists Warning Europe is, of course, working in this area enormously. We are representing the 3 scientists' warnings to humanity. And if everybody would like to find out more about us, then please go to our website, scientistswarningeurope.org.uk. You can also go to our YouTube channel to see videos that were produced in our pre-COP Planet in Crisis, and links to the YouTube channel can be found on our website and on our event website, planetincrisis.com. Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to everybody who's watching. Bye-bye.